Back on Sports 225 with LSU Athletic Director Joe Alleva. I'm Lee Feinswag enjoying this conversation, and it's the Thursday, or the first time you're seeing this is before LSU opens its football season against TCU over in Dallas. And of course, you go to those games, and I imagine going over to the Jerry Jones Dome, the visiting athletic director gets treated very well.
Yeah, we have a box that they provide for us, and but you know what? I end up watching. I've been there now. This will be my third time watching a football game there, and end up watching the big screen most of the time. You can see everything so much better on the big screen than you can by looking down on the field. So I find myself looking up more than looking down.
We will talk a little LSU football because I'd like to get his opinion about a few things, but I'd like to stick with the conference stuff that we were talking about earlier, maybe just a little different than that, which is I have this theory that ultimately in X number of years, there are going to be, from a football sense, 5 conferences: the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the SEC. And from those 5 conferences, you'll get 5 champions, and then 3 at large, which will give us 8 teams in a playoff. Now we're going to 4-team playoff soon, which, good, bad, or indifferent, it's still better than when we were kids and Richard Nixon just declared Texas the
Right.
the AP national champion. Remember, that was like 1968 or 69. Penn State had the best team. And Richard Nixon said, no, Texas is number 1, and so they were. So,
I do remember
yeah.
that.
So your thoughts about the BCS evolving into what it will become with the 4-team playoff, and then my own opinion, which is inevitable, we'll go to 8 sooner than later.
Well, you may be right. I think the 4-team playoff is a great first step. I think that and it's going to take, I think that 4-game playoff, it has a pretty long-term contract tied into it. That'll probably be at least 8 years before it could expand.
So that'll put us into the mid-2020s.
It'll be a while before it expands.
But, you'll be retired by then.
Maybe. But I really believe that you're right, that at some point it's going to go to 8. And and that's not a bad thing. I'm on the basketball committee, okay? So I have to pick 68 teams to go into the basketball tournament. Well, when you get down to those last couple of teams, there's a lot of controversy, and there's a lot of, you can separate them by a piece of paper separates the teams. But can you imagine being on the committee that's picking the 4 football teams that's going to go into the playoffs? And how about the 5th team that's not in it? I mean, that's pressure, and that's really going to be tough.
Well, the SEC champion, the other champion that happens to emerge out of the other 4 leagues that I talked about, and then the 2 SEC at large.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
I also think that, and I want your opinion about this, that those 5 conferences that I talked about will ultimately grow a little bit. The expansion's not over, or realignment's not over. There just has to be some movement among some schools. And the ones that jump out at me, I think about, are Florida State, North Carolina. I'm not sure Louisville's done. I'm not sure Texas, even with the Super Texas Network, some of the things out west. I'm not unconvinced that there won't be some movement in there. I still think the SEC would be better with 16. I thought it was better with 12, but
Well, 16 is a better number than 14. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. A lot of these schools, especially in the ACC that you mentioned, Carolina and Florida State and Louisville's going to the ACC. To be a member of the ACC now, you have got to assign your rights for television to the ACC. Even if you leave the conference, you lose your rights. So they almost cannot leave. They can't leave.
That almost sounds illegal, doesn't it?
They can't afford to leave.
Yeah.
So they have assigned over $50 million of television rights to the league. They can't afford to leave. So the ACC has locked in their schools really hard, where they can't get out. So I think that league is out of the question. Any of those teams in that league are out of the question. You know what the penalty is for a SEC team to leave the SEC? 0.
Really?
A team could leave the SEC tomorrow and not have to pay 1 penny in exit fee, which is, we're the only league in the country that's that way.
I did not know that. Of course, leaving the SEC would be financially crazy.
Would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, because at those SEC meetings you have in Destin every early June, late May, early June, they write you a check that is just off the charts.
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, it doesn't make a difference if you're good or bad.
Everyone gets the same.
Yeah, and I believe this is correct, right? The shares are divided by 15, 14 schools and one for the league.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. The SEC. All right. LSU used to have a chancellor named Mark Emmert who went to Washington and then must have had a lobotomy or something and took on the job as the head of the NCAA. And it has definitely been a rocky road. And I know you know Mark, and I know you've dealt with everything there. And the last year has just been a disaster for him, public relations wise, and just everything else. And you know Mark, and I know Mark. I like Mark. I think he's a really, really good guy, intelligent guy, and he's teetering. And I've had people tell me from around the country that they wouldn't be surprised if he didn't make it through this school year. And then there are other people who think that the NCAA in its current form or fashion will not be the NCAA in 5 years. Thoughts about any of those?
Well, I have gotten to know Mark pretty well. Again, through my work on the basketball committee, he's been involved with that also. And yeah, I feel bad for Mark. He is very bright, and he's gone into the NCAA to try to make some changes that needed to be made, and some of them just haven't worked out for him. And I think he's learned that he needs to have some more input from presidents and athletic directors as to his decision-making process as it goes along. I think he's going to be fine, though. I really do. I really think he's going to be fine.
Ride out the storm, if you will.
Yeah, I think he's going to ride out the storm. I think he's going to make adjustments, and the reason he'll be able to do that is because he is so bright, and he understands where he is, and he'll make the adjustments, and I think he's going to be fine. You know, we mentioned about the NCAA. I think that there'll always be a form of national governance for athletics. I think the NCAA is necessary in a lot of ways. You know, football itself is kind of independent of the NCAA in a lot of ways. It's
right.
kind of independent. We have our own playoff system now, our own bowl system. We're kind of independent. But all those other sports need the NCAA. They need the NCAA to have championships in soccers and volleyballs and all those championships.
Your
that
$1 billion plus NCAA basketball tournament.
And the basketball tournament, well, that pays for everything. That pays for the whole NCAA. The basketball tournament pays for everything.
Well, and the biggest fly in the ointment now is the Super League that got formed from the old Big East, which is all those schools that are such an integral part of the basketball tournament, which don't play football.
Right.
And so any type of division, and I'll leave us with this as we go to break, because I do have some more questions about this, but the NCAA has to, in America, with Title IX and everything else, has to somehow decide football is a separate entity and just go, do what you got to do, and then there's the rest of us. But if it were only that simple.
Well, you know, like one of the things that came up was paying athletes and giving them a $2,000 or $3,000 stipend.
Are you reading my mind?
But what happens is you can't just play football players and basketball players. You got to pay women. You got to pay women too for Title IX. And sometimes people didn't think about that stuff. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cost right there.
Oh, I know. And I'm a proponent of paying them. And you know, I talked to some of your football players, including Anthony Johnson said he did a paper on it. He said, you know, everybody, we all ought to get something. Of course, his amount of dollars was a little higher than what I would have thought. But anyway, all right, I've rambled on long enough. I'll give you a break. We'll go to break. I'm Lee Feinswag. He's Joe Alleva, the LSU Athletic Director. We'll be right back on Sports 225.